Good day, everybody. Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider. Our guest today is the Husqvarna Svartpilen 801. That is an 800cc parallel twin with state-of-the-art performance and safety electronics, dressed up as a sort of neo-classic, quasi-retro, kind of an off-road, sort of a scrambler type thing, for sale in these United States for about $11,000. What we have here basically is a modern, sophisticated, sport-naked motorcycle, styled to suggest that it's not quite that, right? So to put a very fine point on the question we're trying to ask today, if you take a KTM 790 Duke and you dress it up like it's too cool for school, do you get something that's different in any way? Maybe it's better? Maybe it feels compromised in some kind of way that makes it feel like less than the sum of its parts. Well, we got to ride to work. We might as well, talk about it. All right, everybody, here we go. Alrighty, everybody. Before we get going on this Svartpilen 801 Daily Rider, just a quick reminder that this video is brought to you by RevZilla. RevZilla is probably the social media channel that you are watching right now, but it's also an e-commerce platform, a place where you can buy parts, apparel, and accessories for motorcycles and people who love them. So the next time you need something for you, your bike, or perhaps a friend or loved one who loves bikes, think about RevZilla. We provide all of this content, Daily Rider, as well as Shop Manual with Ari Henning, the High Side, Low Side podcast, and CTXP Adventures, simply in the hopes that when you need something for you or your bike, you'll shop at RevZilla. In the meantime, thanks for watching. All right, so here we go. Well, this bike's very dirty, I'm realizing now. I rode it in the rain, and it's all dirty. Let's start with the engine, shall we? It is a 799cc parallel twin. It has a sort of oddball firing order, not a 270 crank, but a 285. What is it? Something a little bit off. Not quite 270. That's how KTM does it, to make it sound something like a 75-degree V twin, which it sort of does. Basic architecture of the bike is pretty simple. Steel tube frame connected to this aluminum subframe back here. Suspension-wise, you got pretty high-spec WP stuff that's adjustable, which is nice. And yeah, the brakes are steel braided line, 4-pot calipers, 300mm disc. Pretty good componentry. It's from J. It is branded Husqvarna. And aside from that, it is the same powertrain, frame, and swing arm from a 790 Duke. It has different wheels, different tires, and obviously different styling from the scalpel, as KTM calls it. And of course, as we ride today, we will talk about how the bike relates to its relatives, as well as the rest of motorcycling. For now, just a couple of things we need to take a look at while we're standing here. One is the Pirelli MT60 tires, I believe they're called. They're kind of chunky American flat track looking tires. You got this round headlight up here, which is obviously very different from KTM, which I think is part of the point. This little windscreen, which we will see doesn't really do much, but you can keep an eye on it if you like. This seat, which is quite stylish, I think you'll agree. We'll talk about how it works as we hit the road. One last thing I'm thinking about talking about as we stand here is the handlebars do adjust. Something that I might bring up while we're riding and talking about the riding position. They slide back and forth on these little rails here, so the clip-on stands here can move forth and back a little bit for some adjustability. Okie doke, aside from that, it's a motorcycle with an engine, a handlebar, a seat to sit on, and a dash to look at. So let's fire up this 5-inch TFT here. We can take a look at our settings, which I might change, come to think of it, before we hit the road. But anyway, let's fire it up and listen to it. It's surprisingly quiet, I think. Anyway, we'll take more of a listen as we ride, of course, but I think that's the basic rundown. And we're ready, everybody. Let's ride. Okie doke. We are rolling now. We can talk about some specifications. I'm going to use this red light as an opportunity to display the seat height. What do we got there? Well, Ninja 300 wrap bike, I love it. 32.3 inches, I believe, is the seat height. I can flat foot with this amount of bend in my knee at 6'2". It is not ultra short and approachable. It is a full-size motorcycle, but yeah, seat height is not crazy high. On the topic of it being a full-size motorcycle with a full 3.7 gallons of gas in the tank, it weighed in on the daily rider scales at 421 pounds. I believe claimed horsepower is 105 and something like 62 point something foot-pounds of torque. Reminder that all of the specs are in the description of this video if you would like to peruse them, as well as an article that includes more photos and a dissection of the specs if you'd like. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, price $10,500 here in the US, plus some bits and bobs that we'll talk about a little bit later. Moving on to what the Svartpilen 801 feels like to sit on. Pretty basic and upright. And, whoa, wait. Fox body jack move. We're just going to take a minute here to navigate traffic before we keep talking about seat and stuff. Where was I? All right. Upright and comfortable and stuff. Yeah, just a very kind of reasonable open riding position. If you're really tall, you might think that the seat to foot peg distance is a little tight because it has its roots in a sport naked motorcycle, of course, but I think it's pretty reasonable. And the handlebar, of course, on the Svartpilen is taller than on the 790 Duke, as well as the Vitpilen 801, which I guess I can't believe it's taken me this long to mention the Vitpilen. But while we're on the subject, the Vitpilen is a fraternal twin to the Svartpilen, very similar, slightly different styled headlight, a lower handlebar, and a couple other little things that make it slightly different, but essentially the same exact motorcycle. More to the point of ergonomics, the Vitpilen and the 790 Duke are a little more aggressive to sit on. The Svartpilen has this taller handlebar, and that makes it, frankly, quite a bit more comfortable at this speed, anyway. We'll talk more about high speed in just a moment here. All right, let's do a merge, shall we? Whoop, hey, we got a motorcycle coming up on us. Catch up with that fella here. Here we go. Nice amount of power. 100 horsepower and 420 pounds is a really sweet spot, I think. I often find that it's satisfying without being overwhelming. It's just a lot of good things. Okay, well now we're going basically highway speeds, and I can say that if you go, well, we're going 65-ish now, which is quite comfortable, I think, on most motorcycles. But for the Svartpilen, this is a really nice speed. Even up to 70, I think, is like pretty reasonable. If you want to go 75 or 80, I think that the taller handlebar and the really sort of upright riding position can be a little bit of a compromise, and that's where I found its twin, the Vitpilen, and also just sort of a more classic, slightly more aggressive sport naked motorcycle like a Triumph Street Triple or a KTM Duke or something like that can be a little bit more comfortable on the highway just because you lean forward into the wind a little bit. But in general, I find it pretty hard to complain about this riding position and basic setup. It's really agreeable, aside from there being no wind protection. But like, what were you expecting? The other thing I feel like I need to call out in this situation is the seat, which I spent quite a bit of time on the highway and sort of some long hours on this bike, and you get tired of almost every motorcycle seat eventually. This one, I just was like, I couldn't believe how comfortable. And you know, don't take my seat review as gospel. Everybody's backside has a little bit different shape and everyone has different priorities and tendencies, but I've been surprised at how accommodating and plush and comfortable this seat is, considering I don't think it looks like a seat that was designed by a motorcyclist. It looks like a seat that was designed by an art student or something, but it's been great. I gotta say, 2 thumbs up. It's actually, I think, a strange irony that the seat is so good on this bike, or so good for me anyway, because I don't think it's a travel enduro. It's not a real adventure bike, as we'll talk about later on, and it has less than 4 gallons of fuel on board, and I was getting fuel mileage in the 40s somewhere, which I realize is broad, but I said low 40s, I would say, or mid 40s is what I got. So, you know, you're gonna need fuel every 140, 150 miles. So I don't think that it's necessarily the best travel bike, and that's not really what it's designed to do. I wouldn't suggest that. I just think it's funny that as I sit on the bike, I think like, man, this is just a great place to sit. I like it and would happily log a bunch of miles. But some of the other infrastructure on the bike is not necessarily for that, and I don't blame Husqvarna or the designers for leaning in that direction. I guess I feel like I should bring up at this point some of the marketing that I noticed on the Husqvarna website around this bike, which is like suggesting that the suspension is longer travel for rugged things, and the bike has a different attitude than a 790 Duke from KTM or anything else that shares this power plant. And I feel like that's not totally fair. I just want to call that out and say that I think it largely feels like a bike that has those things. The suspension travel is not particularly long, and that's okay, as we'll talk about later in breaking down the bike. Off the freeway and into the neighborhood section, I just realized I forgot to talk about mirrors, and they're dead smooth right now. A few thousand RPM, going slow. On the highway, I find they're a little buzzy. I think gearing on this bike is pretty much right on the money. If it was slightly taller, it would smooth out the mirrors at highway speed, but that's a really serious nit to pick, as they say. Ha! Did we get 0 there? It might have been a footless stop. A little bit chaotic, though. One of the things I like about riding this bike around a city is it just feels very agile and I guess ready is the word that comes to mind. I don't know if any of you ever played you know, AAU basketball or middle school basketball or whatever. Remember, the coach would teach you triple threat, where you get the ball and you hold the ball in a place where you can pass it, you can shoot it, you can dribble. The point is, you have the ball in your hands and you're supposed to be ready to do something, the next thing. Whatever the next thing is, you're not sure. And that's how this bike feels to me. It feels like it's just like ready to dodge a pothole. It's ready to jump on the brakes. And it feels high energy and kind of prepared and precise in a way that I just find really kind of engaging and confidence inspiring, I suppose. And as for the basic stuff, the clutch feel and throttle response and that kind of thing, I feel like I've complained about KTM's in the past. I think this one's quite good. I think it's pretty reasonable. Like, I adapted to it quickly. I feel like I have good feel. I feel like I get a lot of communication from the gearbox and from the clutch and throttle. It feels not luxurious, but sort of premium in a way that I appreciate. Away we go, everybody. Wrap. So in general, around town, I find the Svartpilen 801 quite pleasing. It's almost exactly what I want in a city bike. I think that if you want something that's calmer, I wouldn't blame you. It's pretty high energy, not frenetic, but energetic. And that's really the sort of one downside. I'll say aside from that, I think all the basic stuff is quite good. Quick shifter is good, throttle response is good, clutch is good, and it's not too loud. In fact, I kind of wish it was louder, if we're being honest, just you, me, and the wall here. But you know, you don't always get what you want. And as for a city bike, I think I appreciate that it's polite. Here we are on Lover's Lane, talking about passenger accommodations. I will say that I meant to show you the little ridge of plastic that runs between the rider seat and the passenger seat. It's a two-piece seat in kind of an odd way. It looks like sort of one piece, but there's actually a hard ridge of plastic between the two, and I think passengers will find that that's quite uncomfortable. If you sit way back on the passenger perch here, there's like some cushioning, but if you scoot forward, where you might find yourself sitting if you're a passenger, because as you know, there's like always a little bit of leeway, I think that it will not work out very well. I predict that experienced passengers will be quite disappointed with the seat and the perch in general. But if I'm taking the other side of it, this maybe isn't a bike where you're going to log a ton of miles with someone on the back. But if you do, fair warning, I predict they will be fairly unhappy. Right, everybody, into the Twisty Road section here. I'm not sure what your expectations are of the Svartpilen 801, but it's pretty good. I remember thinking when I rode it that it felt really direct, and I feel like I'm in control. I feel like I have good sense of what's going on with the front contact patch, and I think it handles well, and I think part of that is the sort of, you know, relatively high-spec WP suspension on this bike. And I remember also thinking that the tires probably rob a little bit of feel. I did ride this bike back-to-back with the Svartpilen 801, which has road-oriented tires on it and a slightly lower handlebar, which theoretically would make it feel even more kind of direct and planted and communicative. And I was surprised that it didn't seem to make as much difference as I thought. I think if I owned this bike, I'd probably put different tires on it than the ones that are on here, because I think they're mostly a styling exercise. Though I have to say, the bike feels pretty planted and pretty good. I haven't had any weird, unfortunate instances with the tires feeling kind kind of gummy or soft or anything. It's surprisingly road capable if all you're looking at is the pictures of it on a gravel road with a tall handlebar and dirt-ish tires on it. But as we talked about at the beginning of the show here, it's a 790 Duke, you know, in large part. And that really comes through on a road like this. It feels, I don't know if I'm going to say surprisingly sporty, but it feels sportier than the brochure would have you believe, I think. If it's a dirt bike you're after, this ain't the bike. If I was going to make one comment about the suspension, I would say it feels stiff and taut. I like that. If you want something sort of plush, you will need to adjust it pretty significantly. Or again, maybe this isn't the bike for you, you know? Gosh, just such a great amount of power. Like when you hold it wide open, it just like floats the front wheel, and it'll do a power wheelie if you want it to, but if you don't want it to, it's not going to go crazy on you. Just a delightful amount of power and a really satisfying delivery. Okie doke, red light here, we can talk about brakes. So we got a Hyundai pulling out in front of us so we can talk about brakes. I think the brakes on this motorcycle are really, really good. Really good. Thank you, sir. I think that they are sharp and powerful and pretty much everything I want in a braking system. I don't think the price tag is crazy high on this bike at $10,500, but you know, it's trying to exude a premium look and feel, and it's nice that when you get on it and you pinch the front brake lever, a lot happens. I appreciate that. And we're away. Do another little brake test here. Yeah, I mean, you know, I can complain about the dirty tires all I want to, but picked up the back end, so you don't need more front traction than that. Let's talk about the dash then, huh? Let's do that. There's a lot of information. Well, to be fair, I'm in the sort of a dynamic mode here, ride mode dynamic. So let's go just down to street, and then we go back to the dash here. It's a little bit less complicated because you don't have the adjustable traction control thing up in the middle here. Bunch of info along the bottom of the dash here in this row, and then you got your sort of ride mode and ABS setting and traction control setting along the bottom there. Range in the bottom left, fuel gauge all the way to the left, temp gauge here. The adjustability all happens via this little keypad here, which is backlit, I will say, which is kind of nice. Let's go back to dynamic mode because I kind of like that. Anyway, yeah, if you jump in these menus here, you can see you can adjust ride mode and traction control, throttle response. There's some wheelie settings in here, and then the usual sort of bike info stuff. I think the interface is quite intuitive. Scroll up, scroll down, a back button and a select button. It's kind of thing that sounds basic, but companies fumble it all the time. In the discussion around whether or not to buy this bike just for the engine, I will say it's such a difficult piece of arithmetic for this particular bike because this category within KTM's own lineup is just sliced so thin, right? You can either get an 890 Duke or 990 Duke or 790 Duke, depending on how much you want to shop around. You can also get a Svartpilen 801 or a Svartpilen 801. And while the Svartpilen and Svartpilen used to be quite different, they are now very, very similar, as I said. So saying that you'd buy this bike just for the engine is a little silly because there are so many other engines that are basically just like it, and I don't really know that it differentiates itself in that regard. Where it differentiates itself is by having a tall handlebar and a round headlight and having a different sort of aesthetic than other KTM products. That being said, I like the engine. It's just so much fun. So while it seems like there might be too many models that have the same basic powertrain, you know, maybe this one is exactly what you want, and it's cool that you have access to a punchy, energetic, powerful, fun, bassy parallel twin that looks and feels like this bike does. All right, so we're nearing the end of the ride, and that means it's time to try to answer those questions posed at the beginning, right? Is this a better, worse, or seemingly indistinguishable version of a KTM 790 Duke? I think that it is different in a way that is, I won't say better, but different in a way that's different. And that's really kind of all they were going for, I'm guessing, the people who engineered and built this bike. I don't think it's supposed to really be a completely different experience. It's just supposed to be a different take. And from where I'm sitting, it's a pretty good translation of the things that are good about a KTM 790 Duke with some things that have been changed that were arguably not good about a 790 Duke, like the way that it looks. If for some reason you did not like the way that it looks, well, this bike looks quite a bit different. And if it was a little too sporty, or you know, the handlebar was too low or that kind of thing, then this bike solves that problem. It is a pretty narrow silo that this bike lives in, but I've found it for the sake of being a daily rider pretty darn good. I don't have a lot of complaints. I don't see a lot of huge like design misses, really, aside from the things about it that you might dislike personally, which is fair. Yeah, I've been impressed with the bike. I didn't think that I was going to like it as much as I do, but here I am, liking it as much as I do. Good for the stop too. Well, let's go down a dirt road. I've been talking about how this bike's basically just a naked sport bike with semi-dirt tires on it, and that's kind of meaningless, and so blah blah blah. I don't even think it has like a scrambler mode or whatever. Oops, ride mode. Yeah, rain, street, sport, dynamic. They don't even pretend by putting in, like, instead of calling it rain, they could call it like dirt road. So I'm just gonna leave it here, and we're gonna do, oh, that's right, I have the slip adjuster on. Okay, cool. So we can adjust the traction control here. It has a whole bunch of different levels, you can see. We can go up to 8 or 9, I think. 9, right? And then we can go all the way down to 1, and I'm not sure, yeah, I think if we hold it down, it will shut off. Okay, cool. All right, so let's start with it pretty high up here. Let's start with it on 8. See how traction control does. Whoa, jeez, corrosum. The ABS is pretty, feels like street ABS too. Let's turn it all the way up and see. that's way too aggressive for a traction control in setting number 9, like maxed out. It's still got a lot of acceleration. I guess KTM just kind of can't help itself. Ready to race. All right, let's turn it down to say 4. Let's see what we got here. It's just like, just allowing a lot of slip before anything really happens. Whoa, okay. Well. Jeez Louise. All right, so we'll turn it down all the way now. Close throttle, release button. Okay, I think I know what's gonna happen here, but oh my God. Wow, Jesus. You see what I mean? It's like, it's not a, I talk sometimes about bikes being kind of like mellow and kind of like relaxed, and that is not this bike. It's definitely a sort of a like, got its fists up and it's ready to go. It's in that triple threat position, right? It's ready to spin tire and roost and boost if that's what you want to do. Feels like a street bike, honestly, when I ride it off-road, and that's probably what you'll find too. All right, we're back out on the blacktop. We can see if we can do a wheelie, and the answer is, of course, yes, very, very much so. It will do wheelies like, I don't know, all day long, approximately. It's such a good wheelie bike. Throttle control feels really good. The balance of the chassis is great. It's great. Okay, one last question we like to answer. Can you back it in? You may have noticed a Supermoto setting on the ABS. These tires actually have a lot of grip. But yeah, really juicy back ends on the Svartpilen 801. Just another thing I like about it. Good electronics and good control. Excellent. Wrap. Oh my gosh. Whoa, we're pretty crowded here for the U-turn challenge, everybody. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? All right, we're gonna line up on this line here. We're gonna go full lock left, feet up. And what do we got here? 2 parking spaces, maybe a little bit more than 2. It's not like, you know, ultra ADV or dual sport tight turning radius city bike, but totally acceptable. Kind of average. I think it's like a really, really nice approximation of an average motorcycle. I guess that maybe that's where I'm going with all this. Maybe that's the upshot of my review. You know, it doesn't have a ton of horsepower. It doesn't have ultra lightweight, or it's not super heavy, it's not super light, it's not super fast, it's not super slow, it's not super cheap, it's not super expensive. It doesn't do great U-turns, it doesn't do poor U-turns. It's just a nice motorcycle. It just works well. I appreciate that so much. Let's listen to it one more time, shall we? I mean, does that sound like a scrambler? No, it sounds like you want to go to track day on that motorcycle, right? It sounds wicked. That's because it's a 790 Duke under there. I have to look in the mirror and ask myself, you know, do I just like the sort of retro styling? Am I just another crappy millennial who's like, no, I want a motorcycle that looks like it rolls its own cigarettes, man? Maybe that's what I am. And if you're just like totally nonplussed by the styling and you're one of the many people who has a sort of growing mistrust in the KTM group these days, then fine. Then maybe this bike isn't for you. I just, functionally, I just think it's great. And as a KTM owner, someone who's owned a KTM for 15 years and have loved the motorcycle, but have often scratched my head at the way that it looks, the design, this scratches my itch. It's punchy and fast and cool, and it doesn't look like every other KTM. I appreciate that. And I like the Husqvarna brand. I think the Husqvarna brand's cool. All right, okay, well, enough with my impressions. Let's get to your impressions and questions, shall we? LSU Biker says, how much extra do you have to pay to unlock all the features? Fair question. This is the thing that KTM's been doing, right? They put all the stuff on there. You just have to pay to unlock the software, which is annoying, and I don't agree with it. This bike has a dynamic pack, I think, something like that, that unlocks the multi-level traction control and the quick shifter, I think, or maybe that's separate. Anyway, I tallied it all up, and it was $875 extra for this bike, so it would be $11,000 and change. It does not have the cruise control, which is another $527 for the hardware and the software, I believe. Cruise control would be a great update for this bike if it's something you want to do. To your point, LSU Biker, KTM does lock away some of the features and you have to pay to get to them, and in this case a little under $900 to get the 2 or 3 packs and sets of features that the bike has here. Next question is from Malberg G, who says, as a former Svartpilen 401 current 790 Duke owner, does it feel different enough to warrant a different bike, or is it just a Duke with a body kit? So if you own a 790 Duke, I would struggle to see what you'd get out of this bike, really. I don't think it is different enough for you, the 790 Duke owner. If you don't own a 790 Duke, it's way too cynical to see this as a 790 Duke just with a body kit, right? Because what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having a bike that you like the performance of and the size and all that jazz, but it has a different look? I don't think that's really a problem, per se. But for a 790 Duke owner, no, I don't see you getting this bike. It's ultimately too similar. Next question is from Mugo Chap, who says, what's the case for this bike over something with true scrambler versatility like the Triumph Scrambler line? Right, okay, so let's take the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XC, whatever. That's the sort of like retro looking bike, more retro looking than this is, obviously. It has a bigger front wheel and it has like some actual scrambler chops, right? Like you can, depending on which Triumph Scrambler you have, you can mob it off road. It's a pretty versatile bike, as Mugo Chap points out. So why would you get this bike instead of that? I guess what I would say is there are probably a fair number of people riding around on Triumph Scramblers that aren't gonna go off a jump or ford a river. They just want this sort of like retro SUV of motorcycles, right? They want the look without caring about the capability. And I would say the case to be made for this bike is A, you get this sort of look without getting that capability, and what you do get back is more on-road capability. You get this sort of like sharper, sportier feeling motorcycle when you're on pavement than you do with a true versatile scrambler like a Triumph Scrambler. I think you do gain something. You do lose the versatility, but if you don't care about that, then maybe this is a good bike for you, right? Okay, hope that helps. Okay, last question is from MJ Motorcycle, who says, given the Swedish connection, which IKEA furniture does it most resemble? This is a great question. I love it. I struggled because, like, is it a chair because you sit on it, or is it something that's more like useful, like a tool because it's a motorcycle and we use it to get places, or like, I don't know. I struggled with like, so I just went with like basic shelving, and I looked it up, and I think it's the Kallax. You see it on my phone? The Kallax is just so versatile. I mean, it's a cube shelf. Bottom line. But you can do so many things with it. It can be like a whole wall of shelves if you want to. You can put drawers in it if you want to. I think the Kallax shelving unit from IKEA kind of blends into your home and your household. But when you think about what your life would be like without it, you're like, oh man, that would be a real drag. And I think that's kind of this bike. Some people might think that it's trying too hard styling wise, or it's trying to be striking. I don't think it is trying to be striking. I think it's trying to look like a handsome, regular motorcycle. And I think that a lot of non-motorcyclists will just walk by it on the street and they won't think anything of it. And they won't realize how kind of like practical, useful, exciting it is. You know, like a shelving unit. Obviously, I had a great time on this bike, and I would not condemn it to being just a shelving unit for the rest of all time. But that is my answer. I do love that question. That's terrific. And I hope that you all got a kick out of this ride. Stick around just a minute. Let's chuck this sucker on the Daily Rider leaderboard.
Okay, McDokey, everybody. Here we are inside RevZilla West at the Daily Rider leaderboard and historical boards, of course. We got a Husqvarna Svartpilen 801 ready to go. As a friendly reminder, what we got up here, CF Moto Ibex 450 leads the way with Yamaha's MT-09 and Royal Enfield's Himalayan 450 rounding out the podium. I like this Svartpilen 801, I do. So we'll see where it lands on the board. Before we do that, a couple things I just wanted to address that I forgot to mention whilst we rode. First of all, what the heck does Svartpilen mean anyway? Well, I'm told it means black arrow. And the Vitpilen, its fraternal twin, is white arrow. Last thing I'd like to call out is an article which you can click on. The link is in the description of this video. That article will have more information on the design development of the bike, some more pictures, and it was written by my colleague Dustin, who always does a bang up job. Now, on to the ranking of this motorcycle. Is it better than the Yamaha MT-09? It's a pretty direct competitor, I would say. Sort of brawny looks, good strong engines, and attractive suite of electronics, state-of-the-art technology, TFT dashes, similar horsepower, similar size, similar-ish price. Now, I'm gonna rank the Husqvarna Svartpilen 801 above the MT-09, and some of you are gonna say, that doesn't know the camshaft issues and dealer network and stupid round headlight. Fine. I'm not Consumer Reports. If you don't like the color choices or the styling or the dealer network or the reputation that the company has, fine. That's cool. Purchase your MT-09, enjoy, and struggle with that blinker switch that I hate so much. The question is now, is it better than a CF Moto Ibex 450? And at this point, some of you will be thinking, yeah, of course it is, obviously. It's bigger and faster and bigger, and come on, Zack, what are you, crazy? And I will tell you, if the Husqvarna Svartpilen 801 and the CF Moto Ibex 450 were sitting next to each other in my garage as I headed out to work every day for a month, a year, whatever, I would more likely choose the Svartpilen 801. I like it better. I like the amount of power, I like the size. I don't ride in the dirt all that often. The CF Moto Ibex 450's adventure chops are not really pertinent to my daily ride. But what the CF Moto Ibex 450's adventure chops are pertinent for is anyone who's going to spend time on the highway, or they do want to get lost in adventure, or they appreciate the sort of like agility and demeanor that an ADV bike has if you live in a really bumpy city, or if you live in a really bumpy rural part of the country, world, whatever. I do think the point is the CF Moto Ibex 450 is more versatile as a machine. What does the Husqvarna Svartpilen 801 do that the Ibex 450 does not? Better wheelies. Definitely. It has more power. It's got a more comfortable seat, and I do like that. But I don't know, from long road trip to riding across town, it's tough to beat an ADV. And I know I've seen some comments on YouTube. I occasionally peek in there and see what y'all have to say. And I've seen someone say, I would never, ever choose a bike that has dirt capability over an MT-09. That's just a ridiculous thing to say. Well, if you don't want a dirt bike, then don't buy a dirt bike. And if you don't want an adventure bike, you don't like them, then your path is still very clearly laid out in front of you, I would say. I hope that if you don't agree, you at least had a good time hanging out today and you learned a thing or two about this motorcycle. In the meantime, everybody ride safe, and I'll see you next time.
Oh my gosh, debris. Bag of who knows what.